All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, the London is Blue podcast. Dan, one of your hosts here. It is Friday, September 29th, at time of recording. The Premier League weekend is going to get underway very, very soon. But Chelsea don't play until Monday against Fulham, and we're going to break down what we might be able to expect against the match where, look, it's one of the shortest away days that Chelsea are going to have this season when it comes to where they need to get to play the game. Been to Craven Cottage once before. It was a really, really fantastic away day for Nick and myself as we enjoyed some pies, enjoyed some pints. But no Nick, no Brandon to discuss this episode. It's a match preview. So, we have Sam here with me as well. And Sam, we've done one of these now. We did one with the Villa match. We did not get the result right, but I do think the people came to our defense and did indicate that a lot of what we discussed in that episode was correct. And I think now what we're going to try to do is will the result to match what it is we discuss.
No, absolutely. I think we did a pretty nice job sort of breaking down where the superiorities would be on the pitch and where the opportunities would be. So hopefully we'll be able to do an equally good job, or even better if possible, with regards to this. I would tease the episode and say that there are some encouraging things on the horizon. So hopefully one more win to follow up the last one, and hurrah for everybody.
Well, we'll try to help our case, or help the case that Chelsea's making in terms of stacking wins on wins. You can help us stack some wins on wins, though, if you go to the Football Content Awards and vote for Chelsea's very own, I would say, best podcast in the ecosystem of Chelsea podcasts, the London's Blue podcast, for Best Podcast Premier League. You only need to vote just for that. You don't have to even select the categories, look at the other categories. You can go to the Instagram post that they have and just at London Blue Pod. That counts as a vote too. We're super, super excited. Look, there might not be a chance for Chelsea to lift silverware this season, but you can help something Chelsea adjacent lift a trophy this season if we can get a win there. There's an Arsenal podcast, Liverpool podcast. We don't want them to win. That's dumb. Let's just not let that happen. Links in the description or in the show notes. And look, there are also other free ways to support the podcast. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Great way to help people find the show. You can set up for subscriptions on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 30,000. Hit that notify button. Get notified when we drop a new episode like this very one you're listening to right now. Be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And then look, you can join us on patreon.com/London Blue Pod to get into all the discussion in our wonderful Discord. But as we get into it, Sam, the people want to know, first, what is going on with Fulham? Where are they at? We're going to talk a little bit about what does this style of play look like, where maybe some of the weaknesses. We're going to discuss how Pochettino and the team might set up to go against it. And then we'll make some predictions as well at the end. So I'm just going to hand the keys to the kingdom to you to give us the introduction to how Fulham's season has gotten off so far.
No, I think the perfect way to sort of summarize this would be that, after 6 games of Premier League wilderness, we've bumped into our long lost brother on the other side of London. So they're sort of I would say despite their goals conceded, which is 10 goals conceded in the games that they've played, 6 games they've played, the defense probably is the saving grace. They tend to look a little solid individually, perhaps not as a unit. But scoring wise, they're pretty much resembling us. They've got 5 goals now. None of their top scorers has crossed 1 goal. Tim Ream is there, so he's a centre back. Then you've got Andres Pereira, you've got Bobby Reed, Decordova Reed, and you've got Joao Palhinha, who's a defensive midfielder. Then you've got Carlos Vinicius, who's their second striker after Raul Jimenez. So nobody's really scoring a lot. A lot of issues after they sold Alexander Mitrovic, and he decided to go try his hand at pastures new. So I would say that there is an opportunity to come up against a side that is a little perplexed when it comes to their front line. And defensively, they're leaking a lot more goals than they should. So hopefully we'll have enough joy there. But from an overall perspective, I think it looks like fertile land to attack after a nice win.
Well, those are exciting things. And I think maybe people who haven't paid or weren't paying enough attention during the transfer window. Again, Chelsea dominated some headlines, but Fulham had large sales in terms of Mitrovic as well, and I think it's rightful to call out that like he has been a massive hole that they have not been able to plug, that they have not been able to fill. I think a couple of the other interesting things, like they are actually an overperform on their total expected points this season. So I know people don't love it, but it's just a point of reference when we say they are expected based upon the XG that they would have and their expected goals allowed, the way they would have performed in their overall matches. They have been the beneficiary of some luck, unlike Chelsea at times this season, where their expected goals would be 6.6, where they have actually scored 5. So they're actually a underperform on their expected goals. They would have conceded 13.12. So to the point you made about their defense being a little bit better than expectation, that is true. And they have earned 8 points when the expected would be 4.73. So they are actually a very nice overperform in that perspective. So I think you're also hoping that some of the luck that they're seeing, maybe it's that brotherly swap. Like we just say, you know what, we're going to bump into you and we're going to take some of that luck off your hands as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you were talking about the overperformance there, if we had sort of performed to our expected levels in terms of expected goal difference, expected points, we would actually be 5th, just behind Arsenal. And then we actually look better on numbers than Arsenal or Manchester United. So unfortunately, like you said, misfortune has played a big part. But hopefully with the luck that we had against Brighton, we could have been 2-0, 3-0 down if Joao Pedro has taken his chances. But I think we came away with a little bit of luck. Ugo Chukwu could have been sent off. He stayed on the pitch. And there were a couple of questionable calls, but hopefully those bigger ones that have gone against us, the injuries, the suspensions, everything sort of just comes together, makes sure that we can put out our best team. So I would say that in terms of individuals and collective performance, the difference, like you mentioned, the XG is pretty much where they should be in terms of scoring. They've conceded 13.1 expected goals against. So this is the 3rd worst in the Premier League. So they're actually, like you said, conceding a lot more than they've actually should. They've conceded 10 goals, but a lot more chances have been presented to the opposition. We talked about how their defense is individually also good. So Bernd Leno, for example, he's got a save percentage, not a statistic to be taken seriously by itself, but again, 81.1% save percentage, which is the 2nd highest in the league after Tottenham's keeper. And I think Leno leads the charts with goals prevented. So he's prevented 3.7 goals in the Premier League, which is the highest. So he's definitely got the right gloves on and he's been doing the job between the sticks. And interestingly, despite their 10 goals conceded, there is only one other team that has gone on to keep 3 clean sheets, and that's Manchester City. So that tells you a lot about what we'll be coming up against. Another nice stat that I found was that
should we qualify the teams that they have clean sheets against, though, just to maybe paint some of the picture? Like it's Crystal Palace, it's Luton, and it's Everton. I would say 3 teams that are going to struggle or are already struggling and showing signs of a struggle in the Premier League this season. Maybe no more than Luton. Obviously, Everton having a good League Cup win against Villa and showing that it can be done to beat that team. But like, I guess I feel like that element might be a little overstated in terms of like the fact that they've kept clean sheets. Like I would expect them to keep clean sheets against the sides they have. And I feel like the teams that have scored against them, the Arsenal, City, even Brentford, I would expect those sides to score against this team.
No, to be honest, the counterpoint would be, if you look at our run of fixtures, we should have definitely done something similar in terms of 3 clean sheets, and we haven't. So let's give credit where it's due, Dad. I think it's definitely like they're expected to keep clean sheets. An interesting point regarding the attack, because I just noted it now. Like we talked about them conceding 10 goals. So 9 of them have come against Leeds and 5 of them have come against Manchester City. So I would say that they're still defensively a lot better than the numbers show as well. Sure. I would just take Erling Haaland's hat trick out of the equation and say, okay, they've done pretty well. They will be expected to present a more robust, more compact unit against us. So 100% the numbers are a little deceiving for both of us, for us and for them. So hopefully that will clarify itself when we meet. Some other interesting stats were that they've got 56 shots, 18 on target, and like the expected goals of 5.4 that we talked about. All of them are third worst in the league. They've also got the second lowest chances created with 36, and only 3 sides have created less than their 8 big chances this season, and 2 of them are Sheffield United and Burnley, who are in the relegation zone. So that's that. And 2 of their 5 goals have come from set pieces. They've got an aerial win percentage of 51.4%, which is the 8th best in the league. And the first best in the league in terms of aerial win percentage is, interestingly, Chelsea with 64%. So Colville at left back, a move that is secretly paying off. We're not seeing it on the pitch, but in terms of, I think, taking the second shortest team in the Premier League and making them the most aerially dominant, I think hats off to Poch and sort of giving him the credit where it's due.
We're best in the air. We're best in the air. Chelsea Football Club. We're best in the air. It'd be best to, in terms of points, though.
You'll never think that.
We did talk about the fixtures, but I'll just whip through them really quick. Again, they started off the season, the campaign, winning 1-0 away to Everton. Then Brentford reversed it with a little bit of a 3-0 loss when they started at home with a red card on order. Then the probably most surprising of the results that they were able to obtain is maybe the 2 back-to-back, one against Arsenal, drawing 2-2. And then a 1-1 draw in the League Cup against Tottenham, where they did end up winning on penalties. It was the loss to Manchester City you mentioned, where they went up against the Terminator himself, losing 5-1. They did beat Luton, which I feel like a lot of clubs will be saying that this season, 1-0. And then it was a draw against Crystal Palace, their last Premier League match. And it was a 2-1 victory over Norwich in the League Cup this past week. So again, I think the results are a little all over the place from a league perspective. Sam, it's 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 draws. The home form, is 1-1. They've played more matches away this season, at least in the league. So it's a 1 win, 2 draws, 1 loss. Scored 5, conceded 10. And we talked about the fact that it's basically a scoring committee right now for Fulham. It's not one individual replacing Mitrovic. It's everybody having to chip in, and 5 individual goal scorers. No one on the team has registered a second goal this season.
Yeah, I think that's going to be their Achilles heel. I mean, it's definitely looking like they are struggling to put things together. You tend to rely either on individual quality or your unit clicking together. And with Mitrovic gone, somebody who brought others into play, it just looks like they're struggling on both fronts. So ideally, long-term speaking, I mean, in the short-term, football is too unstable to call. But I would say long-term, I think it's a major issue for them. They have quality, though. Carlos Vinicius is somebody that I followed before he came to the Premier League. He's quite good. He was at Spurs. Didn't get the chance, obviously, because he was playing behind Harry Kane. And he's pretty good. I think he grabbed a goal in the League Cup against Norwich. Good target man, good finishing. It just needs to be more consistent. So Raul Jimenez, unfortunately, I think he's played all 6 games and he hasn't got a goal as yet. Not really performing well. But similar in terms of the roles that they want to play. So the side, I think, tactically from last season have remained interestingly the same. It's just that what they were trying last season isn't coming off this time around.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that despite maybe not everything clicking, they are finding a way to get results when needed, when called upon, which is not necessarily the way that Chelsea have performed in the entirety of the season. For those who haven't watched a game recently of Fulham, we're going to take a real quick break, but when we get back, I do want to get into how have they actually been playing this season and where maybe there are some opportunities for us to exploit them. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more about Chelsea's match versus Fulham. All right, Sam. So when we look at the way that Fulham are playing, is it all the same as last year? Are there differences to how they're playing? It feels like, it's a standard 4-3-3 type of performance. Then you mentioned the strength of defense. What's the overall story on their style of play?
So interestingly, I think the major change has been that they've sort of moved formation a bit. So I think last season they played a lot of 4-2-3-1. This time around, they've gone for a little more balance with a third midfielder, sort of giving them some kind of a presence in transition going forward and also defending. So I think that's been the major change. So in every game in the Premier League, they've gone with a 4-3-3 this time. They've only used a 4-2-3-1 in the cup win against Spurs, like you mentioned earlier. So in terms of the profile, with Mitrovic gone, Jimenez and Carlos Vinicius are both just target men, especially with the games that I watched, the two main games I've watched, hoping that this is the kind of strategy that they would try to employ against a similar side with Manchester City and Arsenal. So I did see Jimenez play both of them, and it was more about going direct from back to front. They're extremely direct, so they try to find the centre forward. Then they've got the wingers or the attacking midfielders are very narrow, so you almost want the centre forward to knock those balls down for the other two guys and then quickly go from there. It's just trying to bypass pressure, bypass line. It's not like they can't play through pressure. They've got some interesting players all across the pitch who are pretty much press resistant, can show a little bit of quality under strong pressure. So, but they prefer a very direct style. They just from last season to now that hasn't changed. They just want to be very vertical. They want to go from back to front very very quickly. In terms of their press, they go 4-3-2-1. Interestingly, again, a very narrow kind of formation. The centre forward wants to split the field, and then after that, the two attacking midfielders behind sort of guard the pivot. So if it's Enzo and Caicedo, they will be guarded by whoever the two guys are that are playing with Jimenez. So those two guys will find it a little interesting to play with a lot of pressure behind them. Then you've got three central midfielders that effectively try to win the ball back. The main one is going to be Joao Palhinha. He's fantastic. We all know that his move to Manchester City broke down. Not Manchester City, sorry, Bayern Munich broke down in the most unfortunate of circumstances. And he also had a dislocated shoulder, but he's been quality throughout. So he will try to win the ball back in the middle third. And then once they win the ball back, they immediately want to hit you on the counter attack. There's no stopping. They will go back to front with long passes, try to play their quicker players in behind, and then try to grab a goal. So I think that's going to be a strategy that is going to be employed against us. So we have to be very careful of losing the ball in the middle third because that's where Fulham come alive. Defense, like we've talked about, the goalkeeper, very, very good. The DM is very good, Joao Palhinha. I would say the fullbacks are also very good. Kenny Tete has been very good. He's carrying an injury though. He will be assessed before the game, so not really sure if he features, but he's expected to be fit. And then on the other flank, you've got Anthony Robinson, the American. He's doing very well as well. So attack-minded fullbacks, also very good in defense, tend to be very, bombing up, coming back, dynamic fullbacks. So they will be there. Tim Ream, again, somebody who's quickly becoming a fan favorite. He scored against Manchester City. So, top scorer, I would say, from centre back. So he's, again, somebody who will be key in defense. So that unit of Leno plus the four and Joao Palhinha is going to be, I think, the challenge for the Chelsea attack. How do you breach a nice, strong unit of the back six? And that's going to be the main question. Interestingly, when I was going through the numbers, I also figured that they are extremely strong when defending a lead. So they'll lose this season after going 1-0 up. They won 3 of their 5 games and they've drawn the other 2. So if you go 1-0 down against them, there's a good chance that they're going to hold on to it. They'll just definitely sit back, try to struggle and make sure that you're feeling the pressure. And that's the kind of opposition we've struggled against, Dan. So I think it's going to be very interesting how we break through that without Nicholas Jackson.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that you keyed in on there. One, I do think Tim Ream has always been a fan favorite of the Fulham supporters. So I don't necessarily know if that's a more recent thing, but definitely someone who I think might give whomever we play at center forward a bit of a challenge. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing we'll get into shortly. And then when they tortoise or kind of just absorb themselves back into their shell, I do think that is going to cause problems if we do end up conceding against them. And I would worry that getting a first goal if there are more than 1 or 2 goals in this game, that is going to be a very, very important thing for Chelsea. It's not necessarily even like who scores last. It's like you need to score first and force them to play a different game than what they like to play. They would prefer to score and go into shell mode. I mean, you look at the fact that the wins that they had were 1-0, 1-0 against Luton and Everton, and then the draw against Crystal Palace as well. I think it's also interesting that one Willian is not mentioned as well, even though he has played a couple of full 90s here for this side too, and seemingly has not had the same level of impact. But again, there's always the threat of a former Chelsea player scoring against a Chelsea team when they come back or when they get an opportunity to play against Chelsea again.
Yeah, absolutely. Good factors there. I mean, I think he scored the last season when he played against them. He definitely scored. So, Charity FC rolling out the red carpet, not to be counted out, not to be discounted. So that's something that I would be wary against. But like you mentioned, is it going to be difficult if by chance we go down? Go 1-0 down. I would say yes, absolutely, because Paulinia then starts to sort of like drop into the back line. They go to a back five, and then they try to minimize the space that is there. Like you said, Tim Ream, good defender, very good in the air. So he's definitely going to be in the box, making sure that you're not getting crosses in. The other centre back that has played with him, so I think there's Diop who's played, and then there's Calvin Bassey. Those two haven't been too impressive for me in the sparing minutes that I've watched in the Premier League, and I would say even against Arsenal, Manchester City when I was watching them. Not really the kind of confidence that they should be radiating in a strong defensive unit. So I think if you had to exploit them, then probably that's where the issue is. The Manchester City approach was effectively trying to wear them down, and I think that's something that's I would say comes in their weaknesses. So if I would talk about their weaknesses, they have a very high intensity style for them, and it takes a lot of energy. So they're effectively trying to press high, counter press very, very quickly. And they also try to attack through transition. So it's a lot of long sprints into the channels, a lot of thankless running, chasing shadows. And that seems to sort of wear them down as time goes on. So interestingly, 8 of the 10 goals that they've conceded have been in the second half. So they do get more disorganized as the game progresses. So I think that may indicate that there is sort of like focus or conditioning issues later on in the game. So if we do have a better chance of scoring, I would say definitely try and give them, all you have, like all your firepower in the second half, because that's when they struggle usually. So that would be my strategy.
It's almost like trying to replicate what happened from minute 46, 47 against Brighton all the way effectively to the 75th minute before some of the subs came on, and we really kind of tried to go back into a high possession lockdown strategy to see the game through to the end. Can Pochettino get the same type of performance out of the side to replicate that level of intensity, that level of absolute Cucurella chaos, and on top of other things that forced those players, typically well conditioned, well put together in terms of their patterns of play, the triangles that they formed on the pitch, disrupting that and disorienting them in a way that they cannot quickly enough adapt back to the way that Chelsea are coming at them. It sounds like that would be some of the best ways for Pochettino and the team to go out and really stress test this side against what they can do best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of the goals conceded as well, so they did pretty well in the first half against Manchester City. The 5-1 scoreline, I would say, is a little generous for City. Fulham actually did threaten a lot in that game in the first half. But the second one, as the game wore on, like I said, it was just the entire defensive organization, everything in terms of their compactness in their block, how good it looked. At times, because City were just passing it around, they were switching it, trying to get Foden on the ball, trying to get Jeremy Doku on the ball, wearing your opposition down over and over again. There was this moment in the second half where they just froze and they could get back into shape properly, and Manchester City just sliced through them, like in the middle of the pitch. three passes, goes from the center circle to Julian Alvarez, and then he puts in a through ball for Erling Haaland, and boom, like just like that, in 3 seconds, it just looked like they'd fallen apart. So I think that could be something that needs to be kept an eye on in terms of how good are their focus levels. If the changes need to reflect that, I think it'll be interesting to get a host of changes in the 60th minute, like you mentioned, and then find a way to overwhelm them physically and figure out if we can press them well, counter press them, get those errors in, and see if we can get something out of there. Um, Also, discipline wise, they seem to struggle. I've noted that they've got 20 yellows and they've conceded 57 fouls. So one in almost every three fouls is a yellow card. So that's definitely an issue.
Oh,
They're also
come on,
top of the
Sam.
red.
In a match against Chelsea, it's going to be 1 out of every 10 gets called. Let's just be real about the way that the glasses have been. The prescriptions for the officials who have to officiate a Chelsea match are just completely abnormal to the way that they go for every other team.
No, I mean, I'm just being a neutral here. I'm just saying like this is something that tends to be the trend. Yeah, but they've also got 2 red cards, which is like top of the Premier League. So they do struggle in terms of discipline. They also give away fouls in dangerous areas. I just wish we had somebody like Marcos Alonso or one of those great free kick takers. Willian, for example, would have been nice to score some of those dangerous free kicks. So I think that's going to be an issue. And I would probably say like their attack, like I mentioned before, it just looks toothless. It just looks like a 98-year-old grandmother. No bite, absolutely no bite. So it just definitely feels like they're going to struggle to create. As long as we can just get their 9 shots a game out of the way and make sure that they struggle to get any confidence in. I hope, I pray, being an atheist, that we will be okay.
Well, we'll see how that goes. Now, as we switch gears and talk about how Chelsea, or what are some of the major questions that Pochettino and Chelsea will be considering heading into this match, I think the first one that I want to just tee into is it feels like Cole Palmer has to start. Partially because we saw a really good performance from him in this most recent match in the League Cup, but also the way that he was working with Nico Jackson. We know that Nico Jackson not available in this match due to his card accumulation, but he seemingly was a difference maker and allowed the attack to function at a better rate, or function a what seemingly I observed to be a more comfortable or free-flowing attack. Is that a question where you're like, non-negotiable, he has to start, or would you have a question about starting him in this match?
I think we don't have an option in this one, to be honest, considering that we are missing the centre forward. And I do expect Raheem Sterling to start at centre forward. I think that right slot itself opens up, willingly for him. And after the performance he put in midweek, I would say that he definitely deserves to start. So I would say play him in his position and hopefully get the best out of him and give him as many minutes as he can to develop. But long term, we know that Chukwuemeka has come back to full training. So he will definitely be competing against him. And with the preseason minutes that Carney has behind him, I think like once he comes to full speed, it'll be interesting to see who drops out. Is it going to be Palmer? Is it going to be Conor Gallagher? Is it going to be somebody else? So I think those questions will hang heavy. But for now, this game, I think Palmer will and deserves to start.
Yeah, I think we'll find most people agree with that. But hey, if you're on a platform, unless you leave comments, you should let us know. Is Cole Palmer, does he have to start in this match? I think the question about who has to start at center forward, again, I think it writes itself. People will be asking the question about Armando Broya after getting a chance to see him come in this midweek match as well. But to me, it feels like he's too early in what I would imagine is a ramp-up plan for him, though he might be able to get maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes in this next outing to really get him back to the level where he could be competing for the starting position from a striker perspective.
It's interesting, Dan. So let me ask you this question. There's one other player in that front four who's played center forward. Would you try him there? Mikhailo Mudryk.
So, okay. This was interesting because that was going to be my follow-up question is, do you try to burn centrally with pace and let Palmer hang on the right, let Sterling hang on the left, or invert them, and really try to see if you can just create a bit of chaos in what has seemingly been a very structured defense? And that would be something I would also be very interested in.
Yeah, I think in different circumstances, I would say it would be a good move. But considering how often we go long with Sanchez with the goal kicks, and we like having somebody at least competing for those first balls, it's going to be interesting to see if that strategy is sort of like let go of for one game, and we try to, like you said, just get out our flamethrower at center forward, and say, just don't have any tactical responsibilities. Try to just do the first bit of your pressing right, and just go with it. I think that will be an interesting sort of option to see. We saw Kukureya at right back. A lot of us did not predict that. So I
Yeah.
think if there's a ace that he has to pull out of his sleeve, maybe that's something that could be there. But I do expect Raheem Sterling to start. I think you would agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing that he's going to benefit from is he will likely be better at the first ball retention from playing in that central forward role, whereas Mykhailo Mudryk, there have been times where we've seen him and his ability, his desire to have the ball at his feet necessarily at sometimes versus getting the ball in motion or being able to hold the ball down and then play it off to somebody else. It feels like Sterling is just a little bit more comfortable with that element of his game, at least at this point in his career. Not saying that Mykhailo Mudryk can't get there, but that Sterling is ready to do that and able to do that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the added benefit that Raheem Sterling has played there for us, as well as he's played there for Manchester City. He's played a similar role. I remember like when we were signing Sterling, I think it was against Burnley in the cup where he played, and I think he got two or a hat trick from centre forward. So he does know tactically how it works. He's excellent at pressing. He knows in terms of work rate what he needs to do. He's also not bad in terms of like if you give the ball anywhere close to his stomach level, to his knees, he's also good at like hold up play.
Yeah.
So he's got loads of experience and sort of like technical tactical aspects over Misha. So I would say go safe, play Mudryk on the left, and then go with Sterling at center forward. I think that just makes too much sense.
I think the other thing that I did see some people questioning about like what the combination of midfielders is going to be, particularly with some of the injuries still playing a role and who will and won't be available for Pochettino. The question I saw was just maybe around the fact that Enzo had a very anonymous performance in the midweek fixture, whereas people are looking for kind of the highest levels of performance, particularly in the Premier League. I think the question was around would Enzo get a full 90 minutes. To me, it's maybe not necessarily that does he get a full 90, because you also should be comfortable taking a player out and putting someone else back onto the pitch to give you maybe the stability. Maybe it's something like Ugo Chukwu comes in the last 20 minutes if we are in a good position, hopefully, to allow an individual like Enzo to rest if it's a level of fitness. But what have you seen in Enzo's last couple performances around like where is he at from a contribution standpoint and maybe even like a fitness standpoint?
So interestingly, I was having a debate regarding this with a couple of friends, and when I was looking at the numbers before he went to the international break, he was, I think, one of the top 20 in terms of shot creators in Europe's top five leagues. So he had 11 in his first four. So almost about three a game where he was doing supremely well. Obviously, two of those games he played in central midfield in his normal position, and two he played as the number 10. So he was creating well. I would say that he's also shown that he's taken 100 plus touches in both the roles, further up front and also behind. So I don't necessarily think it's a role kind of thing. I don't think that it's going to change if you pull him back a little. You allow him to exert a little more influence, but I can see why Pochettino is playing him in that advanced position. You're getting some kind of a different characteristic from him. We're seeing box runs that we haven't seen before. It will probably take him a little more time to acclimatize to what needs to be done tactically, but he is definitely putting in the effort and he's pulling out the numbers as well. So I would say, I think it's because of the international break where he had to go to Bolivia, which is a brutal place to go. When you're playing at La Paz at that altitude, and then you come back, I mean, I've seen Brazilian players go there, put on oxygen masks, struggle to sort of play after 45 minutes. It's generally like wipes the stamina out of you. So physically, I think exertion wise, he's come back far worse than Caicedo, and he should have been rested on that first game. I think McAllister came back from that Argentinian duty and he was taken off by Klopp at halftime because of his horrible performance in that game after. And Enzo just said, I need to play. And I think that sort of hurt him. And after that, he just looked physically a little, I would say, like, it's not been Enzo, with Poch added steroids. It hasn't been him. It just looks like he's again a half a yard off. Look like the Enzo Fernandez we got in the beginning of his first few games under Graham Potter. So I would say just um, maybe needs to recover himself a bit physically. I don't think the role is an issue. I think he can play there. But it'll be interesting to see whether he goes back to Caicedo with the partnership that was promised, like you said, or does he start at number 10 and sort of reprise his more consistent role?
Well, that is, I think, an interesting line of thought. Like, again, in the comments, let us know what you think. Is Enzo going to get a full 90 minutes, or does he end up getting a little bit of an early hook to give him an opportunity to rest and recover and be ready for other games that Chelsea have to play and win as well? But look, we're going to take our last ad break, and we're going to come back with our predictions. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So we talked a little bit around it, but now we're going to put at least our thoughts on the line here as it relates to what that predicted 11 looks like. And we do want to put the caveat out there that we know that Ben Chilwell hamstring is unfortunately in a no bueno place and likely up to a month out at this point, which I guess is better than a longer period of time, but still not super great to have your captain and vice captain unavailable due to fitness concerns and for very, very similar issues.
Yeah, our wingbacks need their wings back, to be honest. It just looks like they've been. I just had to get that out of my system. Thank you, Dad. I can only crack these jokes with you. I cannot do it anywhere else for the fear of being called.
Perfectly fine. We've lost all of our Red Bull affiliation, so that's why their wings were clipped.
But yeah, I think what really surprised me was obviously that the report came out that he's out for a month, and then Poch said right in his conference, it looks bad. So I don't know whether it's going to be a month or longer.
Yeah.
But what just really worries me is that not just the string of injuries, but he seems to have come back, slightly struggling physically after each knock. So I hope it doesn't have a knock-on effect, like a ripple effect, and it just takes him longer to come back to full speed. But all the best to him, and he's a fantastic player. Hopefully, we'll get to see him back at his position and whichever role that Poch wants him to play. So hopefully, we can get him back. But if you talk about like predicted 11s, I would. Sanchez is definitely the guy who's going to be there in between the sticks. I would say Disasi starts at right back. You've got Thiago Silva and Levi Colville as the two centre backs. And after Cucurella put in a good second half performance, a really, really good second half performance, I do think he will get the nod at left back. So he'll be there. I would say Enzo and Caicedo maybe as the two in midfield, and then Palmer, Gallagher, Mudryk as the three behind Raheem Sterling. What about you?
So we were talking about this in our episode recapping the match against Brighton. It felt like knowing that Disasi could transition into the right back capacity. Silva likely comes back off of rest. You don't necessarily have Benoit Badiashile up and running yet. That this back four effectively, unless you thought Motson was going to be the left back consideration when he played right wing in the most recent match, this felt like what we should have been expecting and would likely expect on Monday. So I am in alignment with you there. I think the combination of an Enzo, Caicedo, Gallagher midfield pairing makes a lot of sense as well, or midfield grouping rather, because it's three, not two. And then how Palmer, Mudryk, and Sterling operate with one another, whether it's a firm Sterling centrally or some type of amorphous attacking blob where they rotate in with one another. That could be something that I think we see. The biggest concern point I have on this is probably the Cucurella Mudryk side of this pairing. And that will put whomever, whether it's Gallagher, Caicedo, or Enzo, under a little bit more pressure to be, I think, involved and not allow for dispossession or retention issues. So, I think those are probably where my concerns lie with, this lineup. Otherwise, I feel like this is likely the best one that we've got going.
You're not worried about the uproar of four centre-backs in that back four?
I mean, look, these are interesting times at Chelsea. It's always the most interesting time, more so than the last most interesting time. And we're still putting ourselves in a situation where we have to be adaptable. And I think, look, rightly or wrongly, Pochettino seems to be very pragmatic about the lineups he's putting together and trying to manufacture a result. And this feels like the most natural way to manufacture a result. I think people will be happy with Cole Palmer starting. I think they'll be happy with Mudryk getting more opportunity. I think there'll be people asking for Madueke, but at the same time, like Madueke has not played, Mudryk has played, Palmer has played, Gallagher has played. Like you have to go with people who are conditioned and ready to go.
Martin's played as well. So, I mean, despite his contract issues and everything that's been reported in the past week, I think he might get a chance over Noni. So, he's also played on the right hand side. So, it'll be interesting to see where he plays. But my number one sort of question will be: does Poch now look at Enzo and Gallagher's roles and say, I'm going to switch them up? I'm going to bring Enzo back and I'm going to push Gallagher at number 10. I mean, Gallagher sort of like in between lines in a lot of pressure. He has improved to his credit, but again, can he get the amount of goal splitting passes and making basically the magic happen at that role? Debatable, but he definitely makes our press better. He definitely makes attacking from the front a treat to watch compared to say maybe an Enzo going there. Enzo does a good job as well, but his creativity, the amount of shots he's created, should have had a couple of goals. I think he's missed now. I think one or two big chances. Should have had a couple of goals and a penalty. So yeah, I think that'll be the interesting question. Then does Pochettino now say it's like time to sort of switch those two guys, or now that we have Cole Palmer, who's arguably our best in between lines player, maybe just like persist with what we have and see how it goes.
Well, we played this game last time, so now we've got a starting lineup going. That if someone were going to score their first goal for Chelsea this season, who would it be? We know that Raheem Sterling in the Premier League has 2 goals. Axel Disasi has 1. Nico Jackson has 1. And Karin Chukwuemeka has 1. A couple of those will not be featuring in this match. So it's up to Raheem Sterling or someone else. Maybe Disasi wants to get his second. But who would be that individual that you would put fictional dollars or fictional pounds or fictional currency on to go out and score their first goal of the season in the Premier League?
Yeah, I think at the risk of repeating myself again, like if I'm going against a side that has just won about 51% of their aerial duels, I would go for one of the centre backs. Silva has been pretty good in the air, so I would say like him or Colville, one of those two guys maybe getting their first goals of the season. But if I had to go for maybe a trump card, then I would say Palmer might have a good chance. He looks high on confidence. The kind of assist that he pulled out, he even had a shot from like 30 yards when Mudryk was running ahead of him. So good shooter. We haven't seen a lot of that, but maybe this midweek performance is just what he needs to sort of like unleash a couple of those belters from distance. So hopefully we'll get to see one of those.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing on that is you're looking at Palmer most likely to be the individual who can net a result. He has a 0.4 XG on less kind of total minutes and total contribution relative to Mykhailo Mudryk, who's at 0.1. So I think Palmer is the right choice too. And so if you think about it as well, score prediction. So what is a predicted score for you for this match?
I would go probably like a 1-0 or a 2-0, but I'd probably say like I'll go a little generous and say 2-0. So 2-0 for us.
I think I am just going to be cautious in the fact and not oversell where Chelsea's goal scoring ability is at the moment. As much as I would love it to be the 2-0 that you were predicting, I'm going to go and try to keep it as positive as possible and say that a 1-0 victory would be something to celebrate, just in the fact that we'd be celebrating back-to-back wins in the span of 5 days, which is almost unheard of at this point in Chelsea's lifespan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're channeling Mourinho's ghost from the first spell, I think. Just 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. This is football heritage. I think that's going to be, I think, the theme. At this point, I think we'll take a 1-0. We're just that desperate. And we've deserved the points. I think a lot of people are getting bogged down by the fact that it hasn't happened for us.
Yeah.
But I just think like it needs one result, one really good result for us to just flip those numbers on their head and just go for it. I remember when Poch took over, that result was I think a 4-1 win against Manchester City, which no one was expecting. And after that, they just went on a nice little run where they looked full of confidence. They looked like they were expressing themselves physically. So I'm hoping that result comes soon. This would be a good time to start. So hopefully we get to do that to our neighbors.
Well, let us know in the comments, tweet at us, send us Instagram DMs. Let us know what you think the result is going to be against Fulham on Monday. But our predictions are out there, so hopefully you'll make yours public as well, so we can all be on the record when Chelsea, fingers crossed, get some football heritage going and win 1-0 at minimum against Fulham on Monday evening. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you again, Sam, so much. Thank you to our wonderful listeners for supporting us. Don't forget, vote for us in the Football Content Awards. Make sure that we paint that thing blue, as hopefully we help lift a trophy of our own this season. But until next time, Chelsea supporters, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.